The information in this lecture is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professionals. You should not rely upon or follow the program or techniques or use any of the products and services made available by or through the lecture without obtaining the advice of a physician or other healthcare professional. The nutritional and other information in this lecture are not intended to be and do not constitute healthcare or medical advice.
So our speakers tonight are Julie and Steve Rockcastle. They may look familiar to some of you if you were here for their talk in May, I think it was, where they told us all about their organic farm in Chautauqua County in Sherman, New York. Tonight they're going to be talking about shiitake mushrooms, and they're going to be telling us how to grow them if anybody's interested in attempting that on their own. And they'll be telling us a little bit about the benefits of shiitake mushrooms and how to use them. They brought lots of things for us to purchase, as well as a few things for us to try, to sample. Mushroom pate and their tinctures. So they've got quite an assortment back there. So I think that's it. I will turn it over to Julie and Steve, and we'll learn all about shiitake mushrooms.
Exactly. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks for coming. Steve's sort of setting up in the back.
Do you want me up there? You don't need me, do you?
Not really.
Okay.
But you can chime in.
I'll chime in.
Anytime you like.
That's right.
Anytime you like. We've been growing shiitake mushrooms now for 11 years. I think we're certified organic for that production, along with our chicken, our pastures, and our vegetables and things. But my favorite crop is the shiitake mushrooms. I don't get tired of picking them. Well, kind of a little tired, but anyways, we picked probably 40 pounds this week already, and they're just gorgeous. We're into our fall cold weather mushrooms, and they come out bigger like this, and really wonderful. You put them on the grill and stuff them and different things like that. But earlier in the season, they're kind of smaller like this, you know, different sizes. But these cold weathers are really precious. Anyways, got a slideshow, kind of explain about it all. Push some buttons here, and they are log grown. As you can see, my little show and tell here. Outdoor cultivation. We also want to talk a little bit about reishi and turkey tail mushrooms. I just harvested these reishi like 2 days ago, some fresh reishi. And this is a bag of turkey tail. Pass these around here. You can really smell these mushrooms. They have a lot of wonderful flavor to them. These are not culinary mushrooms as much as medicinal.
Is this something that would grow on the side of a tree in the woods?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
These
I used
came
to
off of
collect them in
some.
Allegheny.
These came off of some oak trees. There's another species that grows on hemlocks, and then this one grows on oaks. There's a couple of different reishi. Anyways, this is how the reishi grow, often on a stump or a side of a tree. They come out as these white little balls. They look like little eggs or something like that. And they're really lacquer and beautiful on top, and then they turn a little bit more, you know, brown like this as they drop their spores and proceed through the season. Anyways, I'll talk about that more later. And the way to get the most concentrated benefits from mushrooms that I know of is to tincture them. And we have a lot of little bottles of tincture in the back. Well, 3 kinds of mushrooms: the shiitakes, the reishi, and the turkey tail. And just to highlight what's great about shiitake mushrooms, of course, they're delicious, they're very earthy, they're very, you know, as we sort of seeing here, they're kind of dense. There's a lot of protein in them, really great for vegetarians to put in their diet. And then we always talk about their immune boosting properties, very good for that. They're anti-tumor, anti-viral substances that act within them. A lot of literature out there. Asian cultures have been using them for centuries medicinally, and of course we're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg of what's possible there. Nice little book here, medicinal mushrooms, if anybody wants to look at that. A lot of reading, a lot of great pictures in there too. And you can grow shiitake mushrooms indoors, like in year-round. They kind of set them up in racks, and they grow them in plastic bags. They kind of look like these bags, and the mushrooms pop out of the bags. And you can get kits to do that at home, but the outdoor log grown are the most wonderful because of the earth energies that they pick up. They get rain and sunlight. They do need sunlight to grow. This is not a mushroom that grows in a cave. It needs to grow outdoors. The Japanese developed this system.
Can I ask you a question in regards to indoor grown mushrooms? Somebody told me that you really should never ever grow mushrooms in your house because the spores will go everywhere, and then you could end up having quite a problem.
There's fungus all over your house. If you have houseplants, you've got fungus working. In fact, I have one of those pine trees at home. Houseplant. What's the name of that thing?
Norfolk Island.
Yeah, and there's a mushroom popping out of that today. I'm like, oh, hi. So maybe you shouldn't add to it, especially if you have some allergies or something. But I'm doing it right. Hi there. Welcome. That's okay. You were punctual tonight. Thank you.
Oh yeah.
This is our mushroom yard, so I'm going to pretty much focus on how we grow them and show you some tools and things. This is what it looks like in our mushroom yard, or did a few years ago. We have more logs now, but the important piece is that it's a shaded environment. And we have a lot of these little groves of hemlocks in our woods. So the story behind how we got started was Steve's son went to Cornell, made friends with the president of the Mushroom Club at Cornell, and he came to our music festival, and as part of his volunteerism, he did an environmental assessment, and he came back to us and said, oh my, you have the most perfect spot for growing shiitake mushrooms. And we're like, oh, what does that look like? You know, we had no idea. But with Nick and Logan's help and help from people at Cornell, we got started pretty quickly into production. We started with 800 logs our first year, and now we're doing like 500 more logs every year. And
Do you have them like piled up there?
these are crib stacks, and I'll show you a close-up of that in a minute. A little bit more. Anybody planning to grow mushrooms? Thinking about it? Whatever.
We do workshops in the spring if you want to come down, and you actually go through the whole process of drilling holes, inoculating, and that, and then you get to go home with a log that's already gone through the colonizing process too.
We already
Goes
back to the
Good, absolutely. We have a mailing list in the back. So the important pieces are the year-round shade. Now you can create that with it being the north side of your house, or some shade cloths or something, but it's easier just to find a nice shady grove of hemlocks if you've got that. You've got to be able to get to the logs. We had some other hemlock clumps, but they're like in the swamp, you know. We didn't want to go there and put them. And there's actually a water piece to the production, so you need water available for soaking. We do know some friends that use ponds and things, and you have to actually put your logs in the water and bring it back out. So that's a little hard. So we actually have a water system in our yard. And then you need airflow, but not too much air, because you can end up drying out your logs. It's very important to keep your logs moist and the mushrooms alive. There's another picture of our laying yard. There's two stacking formations. This is called crib stack, and this is a teepee system. This is for the first year of production. They sit for a whole year and don't fruit. And the second year we stand them up like this for fruiting and harvesting, because you can't really harvest or juice the logs when they're like that. So then you got to go find some logs, and there's Steve out finding some logs. And my part is actually pick the trees that we're going to cut, and then mark them at every 3 foot of length. That's a standard size for us, is 3 foot in length. We've been lucky to be able to source the trees and the bolts, those are called bolts, out of our own woods. number one species that the shiitake prefer are oak. But we don't have any oak on our land. We have gotten oak from other sources before, but hardwoods. You need maple, beech. Sugar maple is harder than red maple. We tried that, it didn't work very well, but we like the sugar maple. And also we've been working with black cherry a little bit. So that's
if you use evergreen or aspen or copper, it just won't work.
Yeah, this doesn't work. It's not got enough.
How about cottonwood or?
That won't work.
That's a softwood also. It has to be a hardwood.
Ash.
That is a hardwood, but people say that there's not enough moisture in that one. It doesn't seem to work very well. Good
What if we
question.
have
It'd be
a
nice to be able to
tree?
use the ash.
If we have a big tree that already fell in our yard, can we just drill holes in
No.
it?
It has to be fresh.
Be fresh.
Usually you cut the logs before the leaves even come out of the trees because they're full of some nutrients, and then you go through the process from there.
And this is just about, you know, if you're going to get logs out of your woodlot, if you have a woodlot, be really careful about the choices you make. You know, you're wanting to improve your timber stand instead of harvesting crop trees. So we've sort of learned to look for the crooked ones or the crowding in our woods. We have 200 acres of wood probably between the properties that we take care of. So we've been very lucky to be able to source, and we'll probably be able to source for a very long time out of our woods. But you can still get some trees out of a small stand. You know, one big straight tree can give you like 10 bolts. You know, once you get it on the ground, it can be, you know, 50 feet or something, and you get quite a few of those.
But how long would those last? How long could you use them?
3 years in our production cycle. They actually will fruit for more than that, but we keep them for 3 years, so they last quite a while. You know, feel pretty good about using them. There are other ways to get them too. Tree service, loggers, the Department of Environmental Conservation. We've done that a couple times where we've gotten a permit to cut firewood, and they actually marked these beautiful oaks for us, and we just took them home. Which was more work than doing it on our land, but we did get the oak, which is nice. And this is the year we did that.
That is the oak there.
Yeah, as you can see, there's a whole stack of these already cut and ready to go. A lot of moving them around, but we move them around a lot anyways. It's very labor intensive. So here's the point about fresh logs only. We usually cut as soon as we can get in the woods, which is March, April for us, depending on what the snow is doing to us. 3 to 10 inches diameter. This is like 4 inches here. We try to use as much of the tree as we can, so we've gone up to this 10, 11 inches in diameter, these beasts. But they work. They're just happy to move around. And then you really, even if you're dropping your trees, you don't want to leave them out there in the sun too long if there's no leaves yet. So we try to either cover them or pick them up and move them pretty quick. And then we take them down in the woods where we're going to work with them, and we pile them up between trees like that. Too bad. Come on in. Everyone's welcome, even the late people. Anyways, that works pretty good to just stack them up and ready for production. And then you have to get your spawn. Spawn is mycelium that is growing on sawdust. This is a bag of spawn. This is actually not shiitake spawn. This is lion's mane spawn, but you get the idea. You can see the white stuff is actually the mycelium.
And if you break that open, the inside looks just like sawdust. It's not all white through the center, but it all has the colonization. That's just because it gets to the outside of the oxygen.
That's actually been the
It looks like a loaf of bread that went moldy.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm going to pass around these catalogs too. Maybe I'm going to send a couple down the back row or something. This is the company we buy all our stuff from, Field and Forest Products, and it's really fun to look at. There's a ton of different kinds of mushrooms you can grow. There's 25 different kinds of shiitakes you can grow. There's a lot of variety within the shiitake. And also there's not just sawdust method, there's like these plugs where the mycelium is growing on little dowels, wooden dowels, and then you have to kind of hammer those into the holes that you drill. So and some thimbles. We've seen the thimbles that has a little styrofoam plug on the top. So some companies, and even these guys, offer different ways to get your spawn. There are other mushroom companies for sure. We've just had perfect success with these guys. We haven't had a bad batch yet. So this is probably the most complicated piece of it. Is like when we start looking at the catalogs, there's these three divisions between the types of shiitake mushrooms: cold weather, wide range, and warm weather. We've eliminated the warm weather because it's really not warm around here. This is probably for Kentucky and West Virginia people in our minds. But we tried it at first. And,
right.
you know.
The problem is that, you know, the first year we didn't know what to try, so we tried all three of them. And it takes a whole year of colonization before you even try to fruit a mushroom log. So you go through that, and I think we did 2 years of warm weather, not knowing that whether it's working out, and found out it didn't. So it's a big trial and error.
Yeah, we'll save you that one a little bit. But they did kind of work. But we just decided it was just too complicated to have these choices anyway. So these are the cold weather that are fruiting now, because it kind of got into the 40s, you know, temperatures dipped, and they started to fruit. And they'll do their flush now, and then they rest until spring, and then they'll fruit again in the spring when it starts to warm up. So they kind of extend our seasons wonderfully between the ends of the calendar. And then we use a lot of the wide range, mostly is what we have in our mushroom yards, because they're manageable. You can stagger and sequence the fruiting so that we have mushrooms every week at the farmer's market.
Actually, the wide range needs to be shocked in order for it to fruit. So we take a batch, you saw those rows, of about 20 to 25 logs, put them in a big tub, fill it with water, and soak them for 24 hours. And that actually shocks them. You take them out, stand them up, and they'll fruit within a 2-week period of time. So what that allows us to do is we can schedule soakings all through the summertime, so that we have a constant supply of mushrooms, so we can make our value-added products, we can sell them fresh. And then what happens is, if you soak a batch of logs, you take the fruit off. If you let it rest for 8 weeks, you can do the whole process over again. So we have enough that we can soak continually for 8 weeks. When we get to the end of that 8-week process, we started back at those logs we soaked at the beginning of the summer and do the whole process over again. And if we have a long enough summer, which we have this year, we actually are on our 3rd time of soaking our mushrooms, starting with the ones we soaked at the beginning.
And do you soak just in regular tap water?
Regular tap water, yeah.
The chlorine.
It has a little.
It doesn't seem to affect it at all.
No. Anyways, here's a section on the inoculating. This is what our system looks like. We like to get lots of people out there. How 8 people is perfect in our production line. We learned after a few years to put a 10 over it so we can work in it no matter what the weather's doing. And please, plan to come and join us, visit the farm. So the first step is drilling the holes. Boyfriend?
The process is, there's a special dowel that has the right diameter and the right depth, and that actually corresponds with this other tool, which has a chamber in the end that you fill with the mycelium. So you take an angle grinder, and the reason why you use an angle grinder is because it has a very high RPM to it. A regular drill will work, but the revolutions are so slow, it just takes forever. This you can go zit, 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 right along the log. You actually drill the log in a diagonal pattern.
I don't know if you can't see the pattern there.
The pattern is diagonal so that it colonizes the log more evenly. We have a template that actually has lines on it, so you can start the whole process out. But generally, the angle grinder works really well for that.
And we get the bits at the mushroom company. We just happen to have an angle grinder and just needed the bit, so that was nice. Second step is putting the spawn in the holes. This little bucket has the spawn in it. You're getting a little low. We have to refill that bucket.
And what you do is you take this and you put it over the spawn, and you fill that up, and then you put it over the hole that you drilled, and you pop it, and it fills the hole with spawn, the same depth and the same
a couple different styles here. There's some more high-tech stuff out there too. We're really stuck with this hand system. As long as we get enough people, we're good. And then we wax over the holes. These little cute little dauber things, which I don't even know what they're normally used for. Leather work or something, I think. Is what we're holding in our hands here. And we heat up wax. You can see the pot back here is hot wax in it.
We buy these big sheets of food grade wax and you cut them up,
wax.
or cheese wax, yeah, and cut them up and put them in a pot over a burner, and it melts it down to liquid, and then you soak the dauber, and then you go over the holes and cover the holes, and then take a paintbrush and paint the ends. So then basically you're starting with a sterile log because you're cutting it fresh in the spring, putting the mycelium and sealing it back off so that you know that that's the only thing that's going to be colonizing the log.
And then they get stacked up.
And basically, the crib stack method is basically so that you don't take up a lot of space. You know, you can do a concentrated 500 logs. We usually try in a smaller area than when you can see the next year we stand them up and it takes a lot more area to display them.
Yeah. Some growers will fruit them and then stack them back up, but again, if they have space issues, they kind of move around even more than we do. And then you wait. The spawn run, at least a year, maybe a little bit longer than that. And you can see here these spots at the end of the logs correspond to the holes we drilled. And there's one like right here. Nobody told us that in the beginning to look for that. We're like, discovered it ourselves. We were so proud. Like, it's alive!
And usually by the end of the summer, the whole end of the log will be white, which means it's done its job, and then it goes dormant for the winter time.
Yeah.
So that in next spring, you know you're gonna.
And this illustrates like the difference between the heartwood and the sapwood. The shiitake will feed on the sapwood and not the heartwood, so this ratio is really nice. There's a lot of food value there. We were just noticing some of our.
That ratio is even better.
Yeah, there's very any there. We were just noticing some of our black cherry logs had like this much sapwood and this much heartwood, and we're like, whoa. I don't know how long those shiitakes are going to last, but it's a good experiment. We'll see.
So the white spots are where the mushroom is absorbing nutrients?
It's basically
You're starting to
colonizing
see
the
that
log.
mycelium.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the mycelium that's like that white stuff in the bag.
And most of the nutrients in the log are a dark spot in the middle there?
No,
No, it's
the other-
reversed. Yeah.
The rest.
Yeah.
The dark is basically the dead part of the
Oh,
log.
Yeah, it's colonizing this lighter part. Yeah, and here's a picture of the tank that we use for the soaking. And we just run some water system and hoses there, a bunch of hoses to fill that up. And Steve's figured out how to clamp them down in the water so they're not floating. And we get 20 logs, in that tank, so we have a 20 log kind of system.
Yeah, the crib stack has 20 logs in it, the row has 20 logs in it, and you take 20 logs.
Yeah. Yes.
Would this be something that would be economical to do on a single family homestead that doesn't have a huge forest?
Yeah, just get one bag of spawn, you probably get 20 logs
I
out
was
of that.
thinking about cutting down your own trees every year, and it still would be something that would be.
Well, you might want to find your trees.
You probably
somewhere
have to
else.
source from a landscape place or somebody that does tree work,
Somebody
you know,
has,
a tree service that, because there's a lot of oak and maple and those type in
But it still
cities
would
too.
be worth it and still end up being economical on a
You
small
get
scale
fresh
too.
shiitakes on your table
Yeah.
from your backyard. That's worth it. Yeah, you get about a pound of mushrooms a log, at least in the first year. Yes.
Is there any way to do this indoors, like with grow lamps and stuff?
Usually the indoor production is more like the bags and racks, and, definitely climate controlled, humidity and stuff. A friend of ours, actually our garden manager, he was growing oysters in a closet with bag system. He had excess long bags like this, and so it can be done. Yeah.
We saw one time a whole basement where they were doing oyster mushrooms. Wasn't real appealing.
Yeah.
It was pretty messy and smelly.
Yeah.
And the whole basement was just rows and rows of these bags
Yeah.
of mushrooms.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you probably have to have a
We want that
ventilation
in my
system
house.
in there to really do
I
it
think they
correctly.
did have a ventilation
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, and I think in industrial kind of indoor stuff, there's a lot of bleaching and stuff to try to keep the molds under control.
Interesting about the soaking, the different strains, the cold weather, you can't force fruit it. It comes naturally in the spring and the fall. So usually once it gets set up in its row, it stays right there, and there's a lot of lifting and bending on that, and Julie finally realized, I think after the third year, she says, why don't we take the big logs, because you want to utilize a tree as much as you can. We take it right up to the 10, 11-inch diameter, which are really heavy. She said, let's put all the cold weathers in the big ones that you're not moving every time, and then take the smaller ones and soak the smaller ones with a wide range. You have to soak every time, so it's a little bit easier to handle and manage. It's like, thank you on the back.
Yeah, definitely. And to your question about indoors, these catalogs do have some like tabletop things, you know, kind of, where some companies you can buy just a little chunk of shiitake log and do it indoors like that. We tried the TP method with some oysters. That was our very first experiment from this catalog. And basically is you get a roll of toilet paper, TP, and then you put the mushroom grains, in this case, inside the tube after you sterilize the, and get the toilet paper all wet.
Basically, you take the toilet paper and you pour boiling water over it.
Yeah.
And soak it up, and that kills any of the...
And then it went in a bag, like the bag the other ones were, and in the dark for, I don't know, 8 weeks or something. And then when you brought it back out, it fruited. It was feeding off of the fiber, the paper fiber. But it was such a hoot, you know.
Different color, I think we had orange and gray.
Oh, the oysters are wonderful. Pink and yellow, all sorts of things. Anyways, after the soaking, they pop out like this. Like all at once, like the whole row just goes crazy like that. And like that. That's kind of where this one came from. That had been a soaked log. You know, I pulled it out of a row of 20 that was all ready to pick today.
Do you remove the paraffin, or is it the mushroom pop through?
You cut it pops through, and then you just slice the mushroom off so that there's filling still there, and just kind of dries up and holds the plug in there. But after the log is colonized, the plug doesn't really matter too much. You know, if it falls out or you know, a bird comes along and pecks at it, because the log is already colonized with the mycelium.
Okay. So then, how many fruitings would you get from one inoculation?
Well,
Six, kind of.
Yeah,
3 years.
3 years, at least 2 a year. Yeah.
So you only have to stuff them once?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And you get a pound per fruiting.
Mm-hmm. First
Per
year.
log.
First year.
Yeah, as the years go along, they decrease in volume, and then the size tends to go
Half a
up.
pound, you know. But that might be.
But after 3 years, the log is.
This is like a second year log.
You can't reuse it, no, because the energy is basically gone in it.
We take them to our festival campfires and load them up. And they burn nice because they got wax on it. What else have I got? Oh, just markers.
Now, they only fruit where you had the plugs.
No.
They don't.
No, well, actually what happens is usually the first year they'll come out where the plug is, but as the log kind of gets soft, and they'll come out everywhere. They can come out right in the middle of
Is
the
the
log.
bark wears, you know.
As it gets older, and you know, just kind of get.
I think they're really cute when they just pop right out of the top. So people always ask, you know, what phase do you pick them at? And this is sort of illustrates a very young mushroom, and this is sort of like ideal picking range, and then this one's starting to get a little overgrown. I mean, it's still viable and useful, and I maybe should have had one after that where they start to, you know,
Really nasty.
icky. But anyways, it's sort of about this curl of the mushroom. You know, these are all ready to pick today, pretty much. Anyways, so that's kind of.
Basically, when we go to pick it, we'll kind of take our hand and catch under the edge of it and see how much of a curl there is there. You know, like one up in here, maybe not, it's too tight, where this one is nice, this one's perfect, and then, like she says, if they're too flailed out, then they're actually past prime.
Then what do you do with them?
We use them in our value-added stuff. We'll cook them, and
They are not all perfect. This is an illustration of a really bad day of slugs and millipedes. We have trouble with both of those. Slugs mostly. They just like to munch on them. But we got smart to that after a while, and we started making products. You can cut that bad part off, and you can make soup, you can dry them, make tinctures, all that stuff. So we actually half of what we sell in our mushroom category is the value-added products. You know, fresh will go home if people don't buy them, you know, first week at the market. That's what we do with them. We just process them. And that leads us to our sampling of shiitake hazelnut pate. Yes.
Do you have a knife or anything for this?
I was sort of a dip and go. Yeah. Oh, I need to turn it off. Oh, well, we kind of did. Anyways, I'm going to pass these around. And this is our shiitake hazelnut pate. There's hazelnut, cream cheese, a little garlic, salt and pepper, sherry, thyme, all that good stuff. And we'll take some questions while people are dipping in.
Where all do you sell them?
Our most, local market here is the Williamsville Farmers Market.
It's basically a process of
Yeah, they do.
cutting them up and soaking them in alcohol. You can just take that and grab it and pass it down.
And about 2 weeks. Yeah. 3 more weeks, something like that. It's an island park. Back that way a little ways on the same side. This year
It's actually in the parking lot right next to the library. The fire department's behind it. Seems to work good because there's a lot of accessible parking and
last year it was.
Are both of these the same, or?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we do have little testers on the shiitake and the reishi. If anybody wanted to sample those, we can do those too. So who's gonna get a bag of spawn?
Yeah. Can you try it? Did you bring some? About your program in the spring, where you have, you say.
We have a mailing list that you can sign up on, and then we send out notices to everybody on the mailing list what our schedule of what's going on.
Can you pass that around?
Well, I actually have a table in the back if you want to come back later after the meeting. Sign up, that'd be great.
We can get it for you. Sounds like you're coming. That's great.
That bag of spawn over there.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what you work from with your?
Yes. With the inoculate.
Okay, so how do you know the proper amount? You just fill it up? And
This has a little stopper in it.
okay.
So you sort of punch it into the stuff until it fills up to the right amount, and then it matches the fill bit. Yeah. So you kind of have to get both parts same.
So do you do like walks where you go through the woods and identify mushrooms and what you're allowed to eat and what you're not, and what you're gonna die from?
We do have a forager and an event with our forager often, usually spring and fall, called fungi foraging and feasting, and it's fun because the one guy's a really good forager of plants, and the other guy's a mushroom forager and also a chef, so he tends to pull off a luncheon. And we didn't do one this fall, but we usually do them spring and fall because it's really fun to see different plants at different times of year. So you should come down for that too. And we always look at mushrooms and we're like, oh, those are pretty.
You can keep on
If I could
passing
eat
it
these all
around.
day long, why should I pass it again?
Yeah, you can sample it more than once.
Yeah, keep it going.
These things that you're talking about, can you sign up on your website? Because your website's pretty robust.
It's really good.
Yes, you can sign up there too.
And then can you give us an idea of, you know, what it heals?
Oh. Healing properties, let's see.
Is that like a loaded question?
Well, no, we have a sheet back here that has with the
I'm just trying to pull up the slide I had. Never mind. I'm adding new slides.
this is on the shiitake itself.
Yes. Can you talk about what the tincture is? Yes, what a tincture is. And I almost brought my little kit, but essentially I'll take the mushroom and grind it up. I found that I can my little NutriBullet thing. I can actually grind it. My blender didn't. But or my food press. Anyways, grind that up, and I have a solution of alcohol and vegetable glycerin. Combination of those two I got from an herbalist, and really just fill up the jar with the ground up stuff, put the alcohol solution on it, close up the jar, wait like 6-8 weeks, shake it up once in a while just to make sure that it's getting incorporated. And then I'll strain it, bottle it. There is a double extraction process that I can do with the reishi and the turkey tail, which is to take the first, straining, and then take the woody material and actually steep it like a tea. You get a lot. There's like different properties that come out with water versus the alcohol extraction, and then combine the two. I haven't as much luck with the double extraction on the shiitake. It's kind of mushy, and I can't squeeze anything out of it once I put it in water. I don't know.
Do you dry it first before you
No,
turn it to bark?
no. I usually use fresh if I'm getting it fresh. I with my we'll just do it fresh.
What would you use the tincture for? What types of things has it been known to help?
Oh yeah, he was pulling that.
Oh,
Yeah, the shiitake is really an immune builder, an adaptogen that helps the body cope with stress and things that affect our immune system. So we take it daily, a little dropper full. We think we're feeling like we're going to catch something or get sick, we might have 4 dropperfuls a day. Have you ever worked with echinacea or golden seal or other kind of extracts like that? We've pretty much replaced that with shiitake, just shiitake or reishi. I've got
reishi is known as the mushroom of immortality by the Japanese, so there's a lot of health properties to that.
More than shiitake.
All mushrooms have some sort of medicinal value. Is that correct?
I'm not so sure.
They have curative. I mean, Paul Stamets, who is the mushroom guru, says that mushrooms can cure the world. They can absorb oil, crude oil in oceans and all kinds of different. They have different properties. So medicinally, I don't know, but they do have healing properties one way or the other.
And there's certain ones that you see in formulas, the cordyceps, maitake, shiitake reishi, lion's mane.
Do you grow the lion's mane?
Well, we keep trying that one. We've got the spawn, we just haven't got out in the woods to redo it. We had a batch earlier, and they fruit a little bit. We're going to try a different kind of wood on that one this time around.
I got like a bottle of like this powder. It was like free with my order when I ordered on Thrive Market online. I've been taking it. It's like, I don't know what kind of mushroom powder. Is there any, like, do you have thoughts on like the maybe more commercialized powders out there? Is it more processed than making it yourself or anything, or is it just good in a powder form?
I'm sure there's some really good, manufactured stuff out there. I know Paul Stamets company, he puts out a lot of product. But fungi
processing it more and drying it out doesn't take away the.
I don't think so. I think people have figured out how to do that, and because we can take all these things in little pills, and it's more concentrated because it is dried, and it's simpler. It's like the tart cherry juice that we sell. You can take it liquid, or people do take it in little tablets for gout and things like that. But each works. Just whatever's easiest for you to manage. We never really bought any other stuff besides our own, but I've seen other people that do produce it.
Other than people who are allergic to mushrooms, is there anybody that should not use like mushroom tinctures?
Well, there's alcohol in it, so I've had people that have issues with alcohol. Wish I didn't do it that way, but and usually an extract for children is usually done with water more so than alcohol.
You wouldn't be constantly with any medication.
No, if somebody has an autoimmune disorder or something, probably think about talk to the doctor before you do shiitakes. Or other mushrooms.
I know Mindy has an autoimmune. She takes it.
That's true.
Great success with it.
Yeah, that's true. We do have one person. Yes.
Is there any mushrooms that that you can't grow because of climate issues, or pretty much you can grow everything?
Well, we haven't tried everything.
Well, people try to grow morels. You can buy the spawn, but yet, unless you have the right conditions and are really lucky, generally it doesn't work.
Yeah, they do have the spawn in the book, and I talked to the owner of the company. He's like, well, it might work and it might not.
You know, anything like even in the wild, you don't see a mushroom fruit until it's just the right conditions. You know, so you could get lucky and possibly not. With the shiitakes, we're lucky that the Japanese took the time to develop and hone the production on that. So, you know, we know that when we pick our shiitake, that's what it is, because that's what we put in the log. And it's,
we were working with Cornell to try to figure out what's the next most viable for a farmer to produce. And Stropharia was really the second choice we heard at the time. And we actually have some beds that we started this spring, and we were picking them yesterday. I didn't bring any, but and then the lion's mane is another one that's fairly easy to do on a small scale farm operation. We haven't tried maitake yet. Really would like to figure out how to make that one work.
Chaka?
Yes.
How much do you produce? I'm curious. Like
Last year, I haven't added up this year's shiitake production, 1,300 pounds.
wow.
1,300.
1,300.
Of the mushrooms.
One by one.
I told her the other day, we ought to ramp up the production. We can say we grew a ton of mushrooms.
I know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a
There's
crazy
a lot of mushrooms.
What's the cost?
$14 a pound is where we're at, you know. And we usually pack them down into $5 or.
We have some $5 and $10 containers back there that
Yeah.
just seem to work well. You know, for when we first started going to the market, we would say, "Oh, they're $14 a pound." And everybody would go, "Well, how much is that? How much you get a pound?" So we finally figured it out. Yeah, we figured it out. Well, we don't have any mushrooms there, so we didn't have a scale. So we figured, you know, these types of containers were, you know, and people could see that this container's that much in that, you know, so it worked out.
Simplified it.
Yeah.
You know, they do keep really well in the refrigerators. Sometimes they're around a couple weeks before we get to processing them. The trick is to let them breathe. You know, don't close them up in some container. They will.
We actually sell them and package them in paper bags, because the bag will breathe. And you know, the thing that's nice about shiitakes is if you dry them, they actually, when you rehydrate, they rehydrate almost to the texture and you know, of a fresh mushroom. So if it dries down in the refrigerator after a couple weeks, you go to cook it and it's just like it's fresh again. So
the fridge does pretty much take moisture out of them.
Do you collect your own spores?
no,
No. You buy fresh spores every year?
we could, but I'm too busy. I got too many things to do. It's like,
Well, it takes a whole lot of different equipment, you know, to.
you know, and just to get the hardwood sawdust to even inoculate it in, it just, you know, it's just a whole nother thing.
Someone's mastered that task.
Absolutely.
And you're using their knowledge.
Yep, you got it.
Right. No, that's where she's going already.
Yes.
What does organic mean with mushroom processing? Do you guys, does anyone really, is it a type of crop that even usually has pesticides used?
Probably some people would deal with the slug issue in a different way than we do. We pretty much just pick them and kill them.
So you would basically do it the organic way. I mean, you don't have a
Give them to your
certification.
chickens.
Our property actually is certified organic, you know, so I mean, if you sourced your wood in a municipality or something like that they spray trees or they use the lawn service uses chemicals and stuff like that, it wouldn't be considered organic.
Okay.
So those are the things you have to watch out for if you want to.
Yeah,
you
so
know,
even if you're not doing anything.
right.
The trees,
Yeah, if the tree is on a piece of property that they're using lawn care and fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides and things like that, you know, it wouldn't be part of the organic. But you know, we take the time to get certified and prove that they are organic. So
Slugs make good chicken food.
Our chickens never really.
our
like
chickens never
No,
like
ducks is another story.
Right.
We have a
Really?
friend that actually puts ducks in his shiitake yard, but not when there's mushrooms there, because they like mushrooms. So yeah, we pondered that a couple of times. The predators would probably eat them where our lives are. They're pretty way tucked in the woods. But anyways, yeah.
our den of coyotes down there, probably a lot of ducks.
Yeah, we get little chipmunks in there too. And this time of year, they're starting to feast a little bit. You see a little trail of mushrooms flying up. Where you going? And then they'll get underneath the cap and they'll just chew. You can see these little chew marks. And you'll turn the thing over and there's the white part's gone. The top is still there, but
They eat all the flesh.
could be mice too. I haven't really seen which it is, but some little rodent gets in there sometimes. Only in the fall, really. So they gotta live.
So what's the difference between a portobello and a shiitake?
Well, it's a different genus and species, you know. It kind of maybe looks like one, but it's not. I think they're denser again, you know. Portobellos have kind of a watery feel to them.
Is there more health benefits to these?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I don't think anybody's tincturing
This underneath
portobellos.
is white,
Taking
or,
them for medicine.
the others are definitely dark too.
Yeah. You put welcome to feel on them. Taste them. You can eat them raw too, you know.
Are you supposed to wash them? I keep hearing that you're not supposed to get them wet before cooking with them.
Right.
What's the best way to?
If you have anything on the side, you want to brush it off. You don't want
I
to.
always, when I get them from like Wegmans, I always wash them because I don't know.
Yeah. The only disadvantage is they soak up the water and then they don't cook quite as well as the same.
Yeah. You know, when we, you know, just pan fry them or whatever, you're trying to get that kind of brown.
Yeah. Just brush off any dirt and we're good to go.
Yeah. And they say when you pan fry them, not to turn them a lot, let them stay, you know, maybe only turn them 3 times or something like that. It tends to keep
A lot more browning, yes.
crispy.
Well, I like to do them like roasted too. Like I'll do a tray of vegetables, but I'll throw shiitakes in there and just, it's a really nice way to.
So what you pan fry is the best, like chop them up in pieces or just leave them whole?
We usually chop them.
Yeah,
Slice
you
them.
can use them whole. We'll put them on the grill or something.
Sure.
You know, put a marinade on them and put them on the grill.
And generally, we don't
Like,
cook the stems. The stem is much chewier or tougher, so we'll cut the stem off and save it. And then when we make our bone broth, we'll throw it in with the bone broth. So a little bit added medicinal property, if nothing else.
Just curiosity. What are they indigenous originally just to Japan, or did
right?
We,
yeah,
so
and they don't seem to naturalize here, which I don't understand that at all. But they don't seem to pop up anywhere. I don't know what it is, but yeah, indigenous to Japan.
When you say that, are you referring to all mushrooms or just a certain type?
Just the shiitake.
Oh, just.
Yeah, just shiitakes. Yeah, we had a student from Cornell who wanted to see what an American shiitake production looked like because he'd been in Japan on a shiitake farm.
He worked there for a whole semester or something, or a whole,
like
whole year.
So that was really interesting. He saw our yard and he's like, yeah, it's just like Japan, it's just very small. And he showed us pictures, which was the most interesting part for us, of what it looked like in Japan. And essentially, like, it would be like Chautauqua County, you know, where the whole landscape had been transformed into production.
But they have a whole hillside, and you'll see a strip of evergreens, and then a strip of oak, a strip of evergreens, and a strip of oak. And what they do is they'll cut the oak, because that's best for the shiitakes, and they'll inoculate them and store them in the evergreens to do the production. And then what happens is that oak tree, what's called coppicing, where it'll shoot out 3 or 4 or 5 shoots, and they'll let that grow, and they'll just do production right down the hill. And so, you know, they'll cut a row of trees, and then in 5 or 6 years, they'll go back and recut those trees. And so that's their production, is they just have a whole hillside.
What's the purpose of the evergreen in that?
The shade.
Okay.
You inoculate the log, and then you store the log under the shade so that it doesn't dry out. Because it needs to, if the moisture content of the log gets below a certain percentage, the mushroom actually dies. So the shade kind of keeps it cool and protected.
Is there anything to consider if you're, like, I'm thinking of growing a few different things. Is there anything that, you know, you shouldn't have it near growing or something like that, as far as, I don't know.
Not that I know.
No.
Just chickens. Yeah,
Chickens, yeah.
So you grow your
We've had a
own
little
chicken?
trouble with deer, not really. So.
We raise chickens, but only broilers for meat production. We don't have eggs. So we do chickens on pasture, basically using the chicken tractor method, which is a 10 by 12 inch cage. It's 3 foot high with an open bottom, and then it has a metal roof with half of it with chicken wire. And that actually, we put 3 weeks in the brooder till they're old enough to be on pasture, and then we put them on pasture for 5 weeks. And then we move the tractor twice a day, so they get fresh grass, organic grain, and this time of year, or in the later summer, crickets and bugs and everything like that. So they're actually out in the environment, getting the sunshine and the air, fresh grass, bugs, and that's chicken.
Amazing.
Best chicken you'll ever taste.
Yeah, it's very delicious. Any other mushroom questions?
You rotate his house too?
Yes.
I have a question for you about him. Is he a fun guy? I had to.
You took my saying.
Right. Very fun guy. Y'all are fun guys. We're gonna head back there and see if you guys want to go home with anything. We'll still answer questions or whatever. But thank you so much.
Information in this lecture is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professionals. You should not rely upon or follow the program or techniques or use any of the products and services made available by or through the lecture without obtaining the advice of a physician or other healthcare professional. The nutritional and other information in this lecture are not intended to be and do not constitute healthcare or medical advice.